All right, it's time for us to begin working on our second screen. So what we're going to do is duplicate this artboard. I'm going to hold Command and tap minus to zoom out, and I'm going to hold Option and drag the name of my artboard to the right. So now I have two identical artboards. Now I'm going to press Command 2 to zoom in on that artboard, and let's start removing the things that don't belong on the screen. I'm going to click and delete our circle with the album art. I'm going to click and delete these two icons here. I'm going to click and delete the name of the track that's playing. And then up here, this icon no longer applies because we are looking at the list. That's our list icon, and we are looking at the list. Not that we've finished building it yet, but I do need to delete that and replace it with a different icon. So go find your icons document that you've been provided with. It is just called icons, and you'll find there is a little album in there. That was the one and only one that we left out when we were creating our first screen. So I'm going to flip back over here. I'm going to paste that in there and scale it appropriately. I'm going to hold Shift to constrain the proportions here. And actually, I don't have to hold Shift because if you look over here on the inspector, the proportions are locked. I do want it to be the size of whole pixels though, and you'll notice over here that I have 120.4. Things can get weird when you have fractions of pixels and you're exporting those. So let's go to something like 60. Let's even go to something like 55, and a 55 even is going to look pretty good. And then we'll switch our fill to white. Let's move that over into the right spot. Let's come over here and actually audit what we're doing. This is only 46 pixels wide, and it's 31 pixels from the edge. I'm going to make this match. I'm going to go and type in 46 for my width, and I do want it to be the same width from the edge, which I've already forgotten. It was 31. There we go. So I'll nudge it a couple pixels over. 31. Good. So now they're in the same spot. They're the same width, and they're in the same respective spot. So when the screen changes, when the viewer taps on it, we won't have a weird shift in the position of buttons. So this is looking good. Now it's ready for our text. So for that, I've provided you all with a text document, and that text document is called track list. You're going to want to open that up and highlight Command C to copy, and then head back to your sketch document and create a text box. So now to create our text box, we're going to press T to switch to the text tool, and then we're going to click and drag, leaving a margin around the outsides here, and we'll make our track list. And we'll leave kind of a tight margin at the bottom. Let's get it all the way down, because this list is going to be a scrolling list. It's going to be too long to fit. So I'm going to hit Command V to paste that in there, and now we're going to need to space things out a bit. So the idea of this, it's going to be too long to fit, and we're going to have to imply that the viewer may scroll. So with that, let's start making this a bit taller. And we're going to do so not by making the font huge, but by playing with the alignment. So I'm going to hit Escape. Hitting Escape gives me my bounding box, and it also selects all of the text in that box. And now I'm going to go straight to line spacing, and I'm going to turn up the line spacing here. And I'm going to end up... Actually, we need to make our font size bigger too. I'm going to go to 46. Keep in mind that the user's device is going to be a smaller screen than what we see on our screen, so it's not as jumbo as it might seem. And now our line spacing I'm going to increase, and I'm going to go to right about here. That looks pretty good. I'm also going to nudge this box up. So it looks kind of funny that this is sagging down at the bottom, but the list goes on. I mean, we want to imply that there could be 11, 12, 13, 14 tracks, and it's still going to be navigable. The other thing I want to do, nudge it a little bit to the right. We need a little room for an icon that's going to be over here on the left to show which track is playing, and that track is going to be the clutch. So this is looking good now. This is looking good. It's just not quite perfect yet. I'm going to play with the text a little bit more, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight. Now what I'm going to do is leave the track number and the dash alone, but I'm going to highlight the track name, and I'm going to switch that weight to light. Our app has some pretty light typography. Now, if things get weird with your text, you can usually just click away from the text box and things go back to normal. I'm going to highlight this again, and I think I'm actually going to go with thin instead of light. There we go. Yeah, I'm thinking thin instead of light's going to be good. Now, some of you might be thinking, why don't you just use those text styles over there on the right? Text styles are a little weird in Sketch. They actually apply to the content of an entire text box. So we could use text styles over here to make this and this match, but we can't use text styles within this text box. It's kind of a bummer, but it does apply to the whole text box, as of this version at least. So I'm going to continue going through here, and I'm not going to use the text styles, unfortunately. I'm just going to go through and make each one thin. So let me fast forward this for you guys. All right, there we go. Now I've got my track names. Now the next thing we're going to do is going to be kind of a throwback to some stuff that we did earlier with masking. If you guys remember our masking tutorial, then this will be super easy for you. If you don't, then this will be a great exercise to reaffirm what we know about alpha masks. Alpha masks were the slightly more involved type of mask that we had to choose from earlier, and we're going to create one right now so that way our text fades out at the bottom. If our text begins to fade out at the bottom, it implies that there's more stuff down there, and people will be more likely to try and scroll. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to hit R for rectangle. I'm going to create a rectangle that goes around this whole area here. And now that rectangle is just a solid fill. And if you guys remember, it is a gradient fill that works with an alpha mask, not a solid fill. So I'm going to go over and get rid of my border. I'm going to click on my fill, and I'm going to change that to a gradient fill. It doesn't matter what colors I use, all that matters is opacity. I would personally like to use white for both ends because we have kind of a dark interface, so we'll go white to white. Now I'm going to add a point on my gradient down here. I'm going to do it directly on the design because that's about where I want the text to begin fading out. And that's going to be at 100% opacity, but now the final point, I'm going to go over to my inspector and reduce the opacity of that point down to 0. And now that we can see the text, we could probably lower this a little bit and have it be more of a sudden fade out. But you could see what we're trying to accomplish here. It just happens to be backwards. You know, we haven't really applied it as a mask yet, so it happens to be backwards. Now I'm going to drag the rectangle underneath the text. I want the text to be on top because the object to be masked belongs on top of the mask. And now with both of these selected, I'm going to go up to Layer. I'm going to choose Mask with Selected Shape. And now it has created my mask. Unfortunately, it doesn't know I'm trying to create an alpha mask, so I've got to go back and tell it that I'd like it to be an alpha mask, and that's by expanding the group, selecting the mask layer, returning to layer, and switching the mask mode to alpha mask. So hopefully that sounds familiar to most of you guys. And now a familiar problem appears where the fill has turned itself off. So I'm going to turn the fill back on, and now you can see that slight subtle fade out taking place. So if you're not satisfied with the fade out, it's not too late. With this mask layer selected, we can click on the fill and we can go and edit the gradient still. And as I edit the gradient now, I can actually see what's happening. So I could see if this is going to work, and more importantly, I can see how it's going to work, exactly what it's going to look like for the end user without having to guess. No more guesswork. Now we get to be hands-on, so that's pretty cool. So I'm thinking that looks good because we can still read track 10, but we can see clearly that it's fading out, that something's happening down there, and we feel encouraged to pull it up to get it out of the haze that it's within. So that's looking good. Now I think I'm ready to grab a triangle and put it next to the clutch because that's the track that's playing, and I want to have some sort of demonstration that that is the track that's playing. We could also highlight the track here and switch the color to our blue color. I'll grab the eyedropper, I'll grab our blue color, and I think that also helps to demonstrate that that's the track that's playing. But a triangle will help as well, so let me go ahead and create one. I'm going to go to Insert, Shape, I'm going to grab the triangle, and with the triangle selected, I'm going to create it out here. I'm going to create it outside of my artboard. I'm going to make it nice and small, get rid of the border, steal that same shade of blue again. And now I'm going to rotate it because it is sideways. So again, that's to hold Command and grab the handle here. I could also hold Shift. In fact, I will hold Shift to make sure that it snaps into nice increments here to make sure that I rotated a perfect 90 degrees. So now that I've got that triangle created, that triangle is kind of long and pointy. It doesn't exactly look like a play button. So I'm going to press Command 2 to zoom way in on it, and I'm going to grab the edge of it and shorten it down. You'll notice, because I held Shift when I created the triangle, it's actually constraining the proportions. So again, I'll go back up here, click on the lock to unlock the proportions, drag it a little smaller, make it more the proportions of a play button, and now I'll press Command 1 to zoom back out to my whole project, and I'll move this into position and nudge it into the right spot. It's still kind of big. It is still kind of big. So I'll hold Command and I'll nudge it up to make it smaller in the vertical dimension, and I'll nudge it left to make it smaller in the horizontal dimension. And again, that's holding the Command key. Otherwise, the arrow keys will nudge the position and not the size. So that's looking nice and small. It's out of the way, but it is a good demonstration of the fact that this track is currently playing. So now let's add some separators in between these items to make it look more like a list that can be tapped on to select a track. So I'm going to visit Insert, and I'm going to go to Shape, and I'm going to insert a line. And now with the line tool selected, I'm going to drag from edge to edge, and I'm going to hold Shift to give myself a perfectly straight line. Now that I've got my line created, I'm going to change my border color to be white. And with a white border, I could go up on thickness. In fact, I will go up on thickness, but I'll come down on opacity. I'll come down on the opacity of this line. So it's nice and thick. I won't get weird visual artifacts. It'll be really easy to see, but it won't stand out too much. I'm going to do 30% opacity on that line there. And now that I've got the line created, I'm going to get it in position to see if I can optically fit it between the first two lines of text. I'm still going to put a line above the first line of text, but to do this, I recommend doing it in between the first two lines of text. And now I'm going to hold Option, and I'm going to drag the line down. I'm going to do Option and Shift to keep it perfectly straight. And now that I've dropped it in position, I've got one down. Well, technically two down. But now that I've duplicated one, and I've duplicated it the right amount in one single drag, I can do Command D to duplicate that action over and over and over again. And you'll notice that I did not quite get the spacing right, but that's okay. I'm going to hold Shift and I'm going to nudge this guy up to get it in the proper position. And now that I've got the one at the bottom in the right position and I've got the one at the top in just about the right position, I can go to my layers list and select all of these. And then over here on my alignment options, I can use the second button to space them out vertically. And now with these spaced out vertically, it's looking good. It's looking like they're all in exactly the right position. So now I'm going to click the first one and hold Shift to see what the gap is between the first and the second. Looks like it's 75 pixels. So I'm going to hold Option and duplicate this up. And I'm going to make sure it's 75 pixels from the one below so that way they match. So that's looking good. It's looking like they all match now. So just don't forget about that Option shortcut. You can hold Option to measure the distance between any two objects. And that'll really save you if you're trying to be precise, which we pretty much always are. I mean, sometimes we can eyeball things, but this isn't one of them. We want these gaps to be uniform. So that's looking good. That's looking really good. And our interface is really just about ready to share with developers. Go ahead and save your progress on this document, and in the next video, we're going to be creating a blank document to play around with some other text-related features that aren't going to apply to our user interface. But they're cool features nonetheless, and they might come into play in projects that you work on in the future.